Well, good morning, friends, and welcome to my channel. I am Crystal, and this is Homemaking on the Homestead. And in today's video, we're gonna be spending time in my kitchen. I did a little bit of freezer clean out and a little bit of refrigerator. Pull this out. What can I do with this? So there's going to be some scratch cooking. There's going to be some creative use of leftovers going on. And I finally pulled out a can of pumpkin to start making some pumpkin goodies. And I got that done this week as well. I was hoping to do more days, but we had this little bit of a heat wave midweek that wasn't expected. And it was like, whoa, summer again. So then I didn't want to heat up the kitchen. But anyway, fall came back. And you'll see all that, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So that is the idea for today's video. The first thing that I did was to pull a chicken carcass out of my freezer. It was a rotisserie chicken, and when we had finished the chicken, I just wasn't ready to make any broth yet, so I had just put that into the freezer. I had also chopped up what I had left of the breast meat and put that in the freezer. And I pulled out, on this particular day, I pulled out that carcass and decided to make some chicken stock in my Instant Pot. Making it in the Instant Pot is super simple. I know there's probably a lot of you that know how to do that, but I'm just going to be briefly showing you what I do. And basically it's just putting that chicken into the Instant Pot, adding water, adding salt. I let mine cook for an hour. Now some people do less. I've even heard of people who do more. I find an hour makes some absolutely delicious very gelled broth when I'm done. When that hour is up, I let the pressure kind of come down all on its own, and once that has happened, I open it up and I strain it. And sometimes I have even still meat left on the bones that I can pick off and add to whatever I'm doing. Or I've had times I've had enough on the bones that I could actually just turn it into like chicken salad or something like that. This time I had picked it clean pretty well, so there wasn't really anything left. Once I had that broth done in the jars and in the refrigerator, that was all I did that day. And then in the next day, I'm going to show you now what I was doing with that. The first meal that I had planned was some chicken enchiladas. It had been a while since I'd made enchiladas or anything Mexican-like, and we were kind of in the mood for that. So I started with a little bit of oil and mixed in the flour with that to start thickening that up. Added my chili powder to it, stirred that up, and let that cook for just a few seconds. And then at that point, I add in the rest of the spices that go in this recipe, which I will link this recipe below or give it to you below. Anyway, after that, I added in my chicken broth and just let that simmer until it had come to be just a little bit thick. And I set that aside. Then it was time to start assembling my enchiladas. And I add a little bit of sauce to the bottom. And then basically what I did was just fill up each tortilla with a little bit of chicken and a little bit of cheese. And I do that until I've basically run out of space. I was just doing a 9x9 pan, and so it wasn't a huge batch. And that last one, I just kind of have to fold it and stick it in the corner there. And then I add a little bit of the sauce over the top, or a lot. You just add whatever you want. The recipe is supposed to make a 9x13 pans worth of sauce. And I did have some sauce left over. I topped it with cheese and then popped it in the oven. And ooh, my, that was delicious. It definitely hit the spot for us for Mexican food. Alrighty, so we were moving into fall. The days were getting nice and cool. I was loving it. And then all of a sudden we just had 2 days of like big heat, like 90-degree heat, you know. So we ended up doing some barbecue and stuff like that. So now today it's supposed to only get into the mid-60s, and I am back in my soup mode. I want to show you what I have left over after making those enchiladas and what I'm planning to do today. Okay, the main thing that I have left over is that much chicken meat that did not go into the enchiladas, and I have this much chicken stock, or my homemade chicken broth. So, of course, we are going to make soup. I also kind of looked through my refrigerator to see what else I had in there. And let me show you. I've actually had these beans in my refrigerator for a few days. They're still perfectly fine. They were beans left over from my taco soup that I did not add to it. And I am going to probably throw these in today's soup, or at least some of them, and then continue to figure out different ways to use them. So here's my plan. I had some potatoes sitting in my pantry. I weighed out about 2 pounds of them. So I'm going to make a potato, chicken, and bacon chowder. That is my plans. And yes, I will be adding those beans to my chowder. I think we get stuck sometimes in a rut where we think beans are chili, and then beyond that, nobody really thinks a whole lot about different ways to use beans. I've used beans for many, many years. They're economical, they're healthy, they're full of fiber, they taste good. I think beans just have a bad rep. But nonetheless, you could do something like this recipe that I'm going to show you without the beans. I'm trying to take advantage of what I have. Beans are also high in protein, so by adding a cup of them into my soup, or we'll see how many I'm going to add when I get there, it'll just amp up the nutritional value of the soup, and it will still taste delicious. And of course, I am going to add some onions and garlic. I have fresh garlic, but for vegetables, I am going to be adding some carrots and some broccoli. Not a lot. You know, I don't know, for you guys who make homemade soup without a recipe, because this does not have a recipe, it's really easy for these pots of soup to just start to grow and grow and grow, and pretty soon you have a huge amount of soup, which when I was feeding 8 kids was great. But now that it's hubby and I don't really want necessarily a huge, gigantic pot of soup, although I can freeze leftovers, so it's really not the end of the world. I should probably also say that this will probably end up being a creamy chicken bacon soup rather than a chowder, because it is going to have the beef stock in it. Also, it is like 2 or 3 days before my planned grocery shopping day, and I am almost out of milk. So I am going to add some evaporated canned milk here to give my soup the creaminess that it needs. I could use powdered milk, but because I want more of a creamy taste, I am going to go for this. And that is why I really always am big on having a pantry with some items in there that you use. For me, it totally makes sense. I live 45 minutes away from the grocery store, and I'm not going to hop in the car, drive for almost an hour just so I can go and pick up a gallon of milk. That makes no sense at all. But if I have a well-stocked pantry and I have things that I know I can use for backup and things like that, it just makes it so much more efficient on the days when I just need to get creative so I can use up these leftovers and the things that I've made. Okay, and because it's almost October and we are moving into, yes, you guessed it, pumpkin season, there it is. Okay, I am going to make a batch of pumpkin muffins, just super simple. I am using a recipe I have used for years and figure it makes a dozen, and I thought a nice pot of soup and some pumpkin muffins together sounded like such a great idea. So there you have it. That is what my baking and cooking plans are for today. So come along with me and let's get started. Lately, I have just loved the whole idea of roasting my vegetables that I add to my soup, because they add so much incredible flavor. It's not even crazy. So I cut up these carrots really small, kind of bite-sized pieces. I poured in about half of those frozen broccoli, the package of frozen broccoli, drizzled with olive oil and a little bit of salt, kind of stirred that around and popped those into the oven at 400 degrees. That is what I roast my vegetables at. And the amount of time really depends on the vegetables, how big you cut them, and that type of thing. The next thing I wanted to get into the oven was my bacon. So I laid out my whole pound of bacon. I knew I wasn't going to use all of that in the soup, but that's okay. I just decided decided I would cook it up all at the same time. While that was roasting and baking, I got my potatoes all cut up, and I did these fairly small, bite-sized type pieces so that they would cook up fairly quickly. When that was done, I decided it was time to cut up my onion and my garlic, and I like to smash that garlic because it just peels off so easy when you do that. And then I chopped all that up, and then it was time to heat up the soup pot. Add a little oil, those onions and garlic, and I stirred those around and started letting them soften up. And by that time, my bacon was done, and I pulled that out. Once this was all soft and good, I added those potatoes that I had drained and my chicken broth, and I brought that to a boil. I should say a simmer. Oh, nope. Before I did that, though, my roasted vegetables were done. Anyway, now I'm going to bring those potatoes to a simmer, and I don't remember how long they cooked, maybe 20 minutes or so. And when they were all done, I added in that chicken and spooned in all those leftover veggies. Then I broke up as much of the bacon as I felt like I wanted in the soup. And my husband ended up eating the rest of that bacon for breakfast the next day. Anyway, then I added in 1 cup of the beans and the evaporated milk. I wasn't sure if I was going to use all of it, so I kept stirring and adding until it felt right. In the end, I did use the whole can. Then the only seasoning I really added was some Johnny's and all-purpose seasoning and a little bit of the Kinder's buttery seasoning just to add that creamy, buttery taste to it. And it was perfect. It turned out absolutely delicious. My husband loved it. I loved it. So it was a very good use of all those resources. When the soup was done, then it was time to turn my attention over to making my pumpkin muffins. I followed a really basic recipe, and that, of course, will be listed below. It's the same recipe I've been making for years, and this literally makes the most moist, flavorful pumpkin muffins ever. They're not too sweet. They are actually just right as far as I'm concerned, and I think part of what makes them so good and just cuts that sweetness down is the addition of molasses. You only add 3 tablespoons, but it really helps increase the flavor. I'm actually not sure whether or not that's a typical thing to add to these recipes because I haven't looked at a new recipe for a long time. The recipe there did call for buttermilk or soured milk. I did not have buttermilk, so I just threw a tablespoon or so of vinegar into my measuring cup, measured out my milk, and it had soured by the time I was putting all these things together. And it was very simple. After the dry ingredients, then you mix up your wet ingredients and mix them together. The recipe said it was going to make a dozen. These were kind of small, and I ended up actually, when it was all said and done, with a dozen and a half. And we're not complaining. Hubby's not complaining. So, and we enjoyed that dinner so much that night, and we had enough for leftovers the next night. So it was perfect. Make sure you let me know down in the comments what kind of things have you been cooking lately in your kitchen? Has it cooled down enough for you to want to get back in your kitchen? And what kind of goodies do you have going on? Also, I love it. Some of you ladies have shared with me in the past about how you've repurposed your leftovers and turned them into something amazing, or taken your bits and pieces and done some creative cooking with it. And that is so fun to read. I really, really enjoy that. So anything that you have to share cooking-wise, of course, I would love to hear. I still have plans for the rest of that pumpkin that I had. I just didn't have some of the ingredients I needed to do that because, like I said earlier, grocery shopping is still a couple days away. So stay tuned for other recipes, whether they'll be in shorts or I'll include them in a video next time to keep those pumpkin baking inspirations going. All right, my sweet friends, I hope that you all have an amazing day today, a great week ahead, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye-bye.